Hello, my name is Paula White, and I am your instructor for Accounting 499, and the course is titled Accounting Research and Analysis. So today I'm just going to basically introduce the class, go over Chapter 18, which is your Week 1's assignment, go over the assignment. I even have a video to share with you, an audio recording to share with you. And hopefully that will get you set up for success in this particular class. I'm so excited to be teaching this class because this is your capstone, and that means that you've gone through a lot of accounting classes, and I can even start asking questions of you like, have you questioned yourself as to what area of accounting do you want to go in? So if I can start getting you thinking along those lines, that would be great, because you've gone through a lot of different accounting courses, and there's a lot of different career paths you can take as an accountant. So I just want you to start thinking about that. And so in Week 1, let's just go here. Okay. In Week 1, basically, we have the introduce yourself. We do have the discussions going through this course. And then the assignments are 3 papers for Week 1, Week 2, and Week 3. The assessments, you do have assessments for Week 1, 2, and 3, as well as the final assessment. And those are the computerized exams that you're all very familiar with. And what else I want to say? And you also have checkpoints in this course as well, and you're very familiar with your checkpoints. So let's quickly just see what type of things you're going to be involved with. Because when I saw that this was your capstone, I was a little surprised, excited, but still a little surprised to see the title of your book. And the title of your book is coming up now, and it's a guide to forensic accounting investigation. And we're going to be covering chapters 18, 19, 20, and 21 in this course. And that's a pretty heavy subject area, and one that pays quite well when you get into it. So I'm excited for you on that aspect. So let's go back to the announcement. Not that. Let's go back to home. Assignments. There we go. So there's your 3 assessments and your final assessment, your 3 discussions, and your 3 assignments. So in Week 1, you're going to write a 1 to 2 page paper in APA format, and you're going to submit that in Word, and you're going to explain the importance of proper documentation during an investigation, and what are some of the key characteristics of a proper report, and what are some of the things that should be excluded from a report, like your opinion, etc. So that should be an interesting report to write. So let's go to Week 2 and see where we're going with this course. It seems my clicker's a little bit slow today. So Week 2 is on litigation. So again, you're going to write a 1 to 2 page paper in APA format, and research. You're supposed to research a fraud case. Submit a short paper on how the fraud was discovered and how it could have been prevented. Some good resources to finding fraud cases are the ACFE website, newspaper articles, magazines, and there's a few of those sources listed below for your reference. New York Times, CBS News, another New York Times, and Business Week. So there's a lot of cases out there to be. There's a Washington Post too. There's a lot of cases out there that you can use to write your report on. Again, it's a 1 to 2 page paper. And at this stage of your academic career, I'm also looking for writing skills because you're about to graduate and you are basically perceived as well as you can write. So if you can write well, you will be perceived as professional and someone I should pay attention to. If you don't write well, then the opinions degrade from there. So also work on writing tight, well-written papers. And let's see what week 3 has in store. Speeding right along here. There we go. Week 3 is working with attorneys. And again, it's a 1 to 2 page paper. APA, as noted in Chapter 20, when matters arise at a company that require investigation, in-house or out-house counsel often participate in or direct the investigation. The forensic accounting investigator often works with such counsel. And for this paper, describe the proper way that an accounting investigator should work with an attorney and how evidence should be collected and cared for. And remember to reference all your sources. So these should be 3 very interesting papers to research and write on, as well as for me to read. So I'm excited. So I want to show you first the textbook. We're going to go back and forth on the textbook and view full screen. There we go. Okay, so chapter 18 is report of investigation. And I know you can read, but I just want to kind of go through some of this with you. Okay, some types of reports that you'll be learning about in this week will be a report on investigation, which is a written report given directly to the client. It may be the company's management, a board, an audit committee, in-house attorneys, or outside attorneys or counsel. It could be a report on the expert report filed in a civil court proceedings. And this book and this course will touch on this topic only as it pertains to civil fraud court proceedings. And it talks about the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and they publish an excellent practice aid in the full range of expert reports. Affidavits. These are voluntary declarations of fact and are communicated in written form and sworn to by the witness, the declarant, before an officer authorized by the court. You see affidavits all the time in television shows. and informal reports, and these include memos to files, summary of outlines used in delivery of an oral report, interview notes, spreadsheets, listing transactions along with explanatory annotations, and other less formal written materials. On the oral reports, they're usually given by the forensic accounting investigation engagement leader, like the team leader, to those overseeing the investigation, such as the company's board or those who represent the company's interests, such as outside counsel. And these oral reports may involve giving a deposition as a fact witness or expert witness, during which everything is said that is said and by our parties of the deposition is transcribed by a court reporter. So, the importance of adequate preparation. If you ever say, I could have given you a more thorough and accurate report if I had had more time to prepare, this is the mark of an inexperienced forensic accounting investigator who will no doubt say that at least once in a career in response to an irate client who's dissatisfied with a report on the preliminary results of an investigation. We're busy, and this is a complex world, and in the course of a busy and complex investigation, not everything on the task list has the same priority. So, experienced forensic accounting investigators know that any request for an update on an ongoing investigation is a report in the truest sense of the word report. One should not assume that an update delivered orally can be treated more casually than a written update. All reports deserve adequate preparation time and presentation in accordance with the professional standards of practice. So, no report, oral or written, should be considered unofficial. Regardless of what you say or write, to qualify your comments, once a document leaves your hands or the words leave your lips, you cannot control the further distribution of the information you have just communicated. Take time to get it right. So, with that kind of scary, I mean, my gosh, everything you say is basically extremely important and report worthy and could be used in court. That's a pretty heavy responsibility because you're talking fraud, you're talking examination. So what I just read to you talked about standards of reporting, and there are two basic groups that are involved in reporting standards. And one is, if you're a certified fraud examiner, CFE, there's applicable standards that's found in the Fraud Examiner's Manual, and that's published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. We're going to visit their website today. And if you're a certified public accountant, it would be really cool if you had both of these. But if you're a CPA, you should follow the reporting standards required for consulting engagements, and those are found in the AICPA Statement on Standards for Consulting Services. And if you're both, you'll be required to follow the standards of both. AICPA standards are quite broad, but the standards of the ACFE are more specific to fraud investigations. And there's unlikely to be contradictory guidance if both professional standards are followed. So the CPAs are required to follow AICPA Statement of Standards for Consulting Services, SSCS. And you need to know Rule Rule 201 of the ACCPA Code of Professional Conduct, and that means we need to have professional competence. Undertake only those services that you or your firm can reasonably expect to complete with professional competence. Do professional care. Exercise due professional care in the performance of the professional services. Planning and supervision. You should adequately plan and supervise the performance of these services and sufficient relevant data. You're supposed to obtain sufficient relevant data to afford a reasonable basis for your conclusion or your recommendations in relation to any professional services performed. And there's another rule that's very important, Rule 202 of the same Code of Professional Conduct. And don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole book to you, but some parts of it are very important. Serve the client interest by seeking to accomplish the objectives established by the understanding with the client while maintaining integrity and objectivity. Integrity requires a member to be, among other things, honest and candid within the constraints of client confidentiality. Service and the public trust should not be subordinated to personal gain and advantage. Objectivity is a state of mind, a quality that lends value to member services. It's a distinguishing feature of the profession. The principle of objectivity imposes the obligation to be impartial, intellectually honest, and free of conflicts of interest. Independence precludes relationships that may appear to impair a member's objectivity in rendering attestation services. That is a very heavy paragraph, but so critical to you as a future CPA, to you as a future professional accountant. And then understanding with the client. So that's our client interest. Understanding with the client. You have to establish with the client a written or oral understanding about the responsibilities of the parties and the nature, scope, and limitations of services to be performed, and modify the understanding if circumstances require a significant change during the engagement. And communication with the client. You have to inform the client of conflicts of interest that may occur pursuant to the interpretations of Rule 102. You cannot have a conflict of interest and work independently and professionally on a project. Significant reservations concerning the scope or benefits of the engagement. And you have to inform the client of significant engagement findings or events. A conflict of interest may occur if a member performs a service for a client or employer and the member of his or her firm has a significant relationship with another person, entity, product, or service that could be viewed as impairing the member's objectivity. If this significant relationship is disclosed to and consent is obtained from the client, employer, or other appropriate parties, the rule should not operate to prohibit the performance of the professional service. Just the client needs to know. Okay, so let's take a little tour. Okay, to the ACCPA. This is www.ACCPA.org, American Institute of CPAs. If you're on Facebook, you can actually search for ACCPA And if you click on like, you'll be able to get a feed of all news articles that pop into their website. They feed it directly to Facebook, which is quite a cool concept. So anyway, here's membership information. And there are member discount programs. There's student discounts. And how to become a CPA, getting started, scholarships, how to get licensed. You have to pass a CPA exam, and then you get licensed. And that exam is a unified exam nationwide. Licensure is granted by the states. So just don't go to the American Institute of CPAs as your only source. Go to also your state, and you can Google this. Like if you're in the state of Nebraska, just say Nebraska CPA Society or Nebraska CPA license, and you'll go right into the right spot for that information. Each state also has their society, so each state has their own CPA society. Like I used to live in Illinois, so there was an Illinois CPA society. And there's one in California where I currently live, and there's one in your state also. So look for those. You've gone through all these coursework classes in accounting. Why not take advantage of continuing your relationships, continuing your networking, seeing where jobs might be in your community? Touch base with these societies. So there's CPEs and conferences. CPE is continuing professional education. As a licensed CPA, I had to do 40 hours every other year. Career path, salary information, CPA marketing toolkits, women in the profession, diversity and inclusion, areas of interest, accounting education, business industry government. How about audit quality? Center for Plain English Accounting. How about Chartered Global Management Accountant? Employee Benefit Plan Audit Quality Center and Financial Reporting Center. And these are research areas. They have white papers. They have research. They have already researched many areas. So check out the white papers. Check out the exposure drafts. These exposure drafts are how AICPA asks the community of business and asks other CPAs, what do you think about these proposed changes to generally accepted accounting principles? There's external link, future of learning. How about healthcare reform? Small business relief, standard surveys, and they have a technical hotline. And if I actually did that, we could see all the research area. Oh, of course, and these are publication areas. So there's a lot of information in the AICPA.org website. They have advocacy as well as the AICPA store, which I guess has got some cups and t-shirts and web events. And you can buy reports. You have a member discount if you try and get a home mortgage with through Wells Fargo. So it's quite a powerful website. And they also have a link to CPA.com, AICPA.org, and IFRS.com. IFRS is important to us because it's the International Financial Reporting System. Okay, with that, let's go to the next one I want to share with you. Well, I can't get to it, so let me try and get to it this way. Oh, okay, get to it this way. Okay, ACFE, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. That was the other standard setting organization that I just read about in your textbook. It was AICPA for the CPAs, and it was the ACFE for the CFEs, the Certified Fraud Examiners. And they have quite an awesome website. You can browse topics, browse by type. They have a fraud resources library. There's a report to the nations, there's free resources, and there's Fraud 101. What is fraud? There's a fraud resources library of videos and podcasts, and somewhere where you can join them. There's internal fraud, external fraud. How about fraud against individuals? Why does fraud occur? Well, fraud occurs because there's financial pressure. You can rationalize, and you have the opportunity. This is one of the triangles. This is the fraud triangle. So if you don't have opportunity, rationalizing and financial pressure you can't have fraud. If you don't have financial pressure, rationalization and opportunity doesn't cause fraud. And if you don't have the rationalization, opportunity and financial pressure doesn't cause you to do fraudulent things either. So all three are components of the nature of fraud. So let me okay, give me a second here. I'm almost there, folks.
This is Emily Primo, Assistant Editor of Fraud Magazine, and I'm joined by Chris Ekimoff, a Director at FTI Consulting in the Forensic and Litigation Practice in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Can you go over your career path from when you graduated from college to your current position?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's definitely been an interesting road. I don't think that it's something I would have predicted if you asked me 10 years ago where I would be, how I would get to where I am today. But I think that's up to some of the things we'll discuss today as well. So I'd originally focused on accounting in high school. I had a business teacher in high school who focused his business classes on accounting, and that was something I really identified with as both a viable career option down the road as well as something that I was passionate about. I can still remember balancing my first 14-column spreadsheet of consolidating entries and eliminating entries at the end of the year for the exercise we were doing, and feeling that satisfaction that was there. And I think that that's a specialty that, if you have, that accounting is definitely a focus for you. So I'd gotten involved in, went to St. Bonaventure University, which is a small liberal arts college an hour south of Buffalo, New York, as a major in accounting in their dual degree program. So it was a 5-year program with a bachelor's and a master's degree, an MBA in business with a focus in accounting that is tailored towards sitting for the CPA exam. Upon graduating with that, I had an existing relationship through a leadership conference and a subsequent internship with Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms. And to me, as soon as I got interested in accounting, I saw just the long-term, benefits is probably the wrong word, but the long-term kind of career options that someone who works for a big four has, versus doing some other things. And I wasn't really confident 100% in where I wanted to sit or what I wanted to do. And in a position like that, the big four is definitely a place where you can leverage that experience and those skills down the road in a lot of different ways. So getting involved with Deloitte was really key to kind of launching my career in a direction that where I landed today.
And could you explain a little bit about what it is you are doing today?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I'm in the forensic and litigation consulting group here at FTI, and basically we like to talk about forensic, away from kind of the CSI shows on TV, and really the meaning of the word can be taken as for presentation in the courts. So from a forensic accounting perspective, the work that we do is, almost always tied directly to a court proceeding or a legal case, and working with the financial information that may come up in a lawsuit or in a dispute between business partners or in divorce proceedings or, in financial investigations in general. So as attorneys are developing their cases, looking at pursuing actions, filing motions, anytime there's a clause in those motions or in those briefs that has to do with financial information, they'll often look to experts in that type of information. So I work for the gentleman who will often be testifying experts as well as consulting experts with attorneys on how to develop their case, how to ask financial people at companies and in business financial related questions. The attorneys are very well studied in the law, but may not have spent as much time in the details of accounting, the details of general ledgers that may come up in a case. So we're often in that position to help guide the trial, guide the briefs, work with the attorneys on how to best word or explore different avenues and really understand their case to a whole new level. So for me, kind of the lead-in going back again to the early days is I had always been interested in the FBI. I thought chasing bad guys was a great thing to do, and that's kind of what took me down the accounting path, knowing that there's a lot of financial investigation on the law enforcement side. But as I explored my career, I realized that there were more opportunities that interested me outside of law enforcement than inside, and I kind of scratched that itch with the litigation support work I do now. The people who serve in our law enforcement are very well suited for that and have a great attitude to meet those demands, and that's not something that I could see myself doing or having the ability to do as well as they did. So to me, it was much more of that focus on the courtroom and the legal side of things to understand how we could best serve the client and in some cases with the cases I've worked on, society as a whole.
So would you say that's basically how you became interested in the fraud fighting profession?
Definitely.
Marrying the two, the accounting with the litigation side.
Exactly. And a lot of times on the cases I work in my current position, we will be asked to do, a kind of a clandestine or an unknown to the company investigation. Firms like FTI and others will be hired by boards of directors or executives to review the actual work product of people or their activity to see if are they embezzling money, are they improperly performing the review of their expenses they should be doing. And so from that side, that's definitely a fraud related idea. But other times, we'll be in cases that are much less fraud focused and on who is interpreting this stipulation of the contract correctly, who's accounting for this under the right manner, and oftentimes there may be some inklings of fraud there, some inklings of subversive activities, but oftentimes it's either a misunderstanding or something that's tossed up to the court as well. So it kind of sits on those two sides of the fraud coin, if you will.
What challenges did you face along the way, getting from college to where you are now?
The main focus when I was thinking about those challenges is definitely being able to identify the seat you want to be in down the road, and how to get there. There are a lot of opportunities for people who start out, say, in public accounting in the audit profession, that people in litigation support and in fraud investigation sometimes aren't viewed in the same attitude or with the same experience or skills that an auditor has, and that's 100% true. I've never worked a busy season on a publicly filed client from an accounting perspective or an audit perspective in my career. So there are certain things that I'll never be tagged for, that I'll never be tasked with, that I'll never have the ability to respond to, whether in the courtroom or an investigation, with the same amount of confidence that someone who spent a portion of their career in audit will be. So I think from a challenge perspective, that perception and that actual skill set is something that I don't have, but can be augmented and facilitated in a lot of different ways too. Aside from the background and challenges on that side, I remember having a conversation with my dad when I first started at Deloitte, and a senior manager had approached me and said, we have 2 projects that we're going to start next month, and I'd like you to choose what you're going to be on. And I called my dad and told him about the basics of both of the projects and how I really didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to pick the wrong one. And I have his quote here that I keep with me, and it says, even if you pick the wrong project, you'll have at least 40 more years in your career to make up for it. So knowing that you have those options and opportunities sometimes can seem like a challenge, and you don't want to make the wrong choice, but knowing that your time horizon may be a little bit longer to rectify it can be good. And then just to keep going on the challenges question, one of the things that's tougher per se in the litigation support and forensic accounting realm is you're often working on a variety of cases at the same time. 3, 4, 5, 6 different matters will be happening concurrently. Staying organized is definitely a huge part of the job that is a constant challenge, as court dates are constantly updated and changed, and requirements for types of filings that are going to be produced for the court, or deliverables that you're providing the attorney clients that you have. Those things are, you got to be a diligent list maker. You got to use the technology functions at your fingertips and that you're comfortable with, whether that's reminders in Outlook or keeping a little book with you like I do and just writing everything down that anyone says to you, just so you have a record of it. So keeping track of that is definitely a key challenge in anyone's career as they develop it, especially in the litigation support side.
Based on those challenges you face, or other challenges that maybe you didn't mention here, what advice could you give others just starting in their careers?
So I do spend a portion of my time working as both a formal advisor to staff here in my position now, as well as working with different groups outside, whether it's the ICPA or the ACFE, to provide some kind of informal mentoringship. And I always use the same 3 ideas when I talk to people. The first is ask questions. When you're starting out in your career, you have to know that you don't bring an understanding, or as an in-depth understanding as the people you're working with when you're the most junior person on the engagement, or when you're the youngest person in the office, or it's your first week at work. And I always say ask questions to the point of annoyance. You don't want to self-filter and say, I don't want to appear that I don't know what's going on. I don't want to be perceived as being annoying, so I'm just not going to speak up. It's much more important to speak up and be told to, I'm, as a senior or as a manager, hey, we'd love to catch up on this. I'm going to need about an hour or 2 to get what I need to get done. Come back to me when you can. That's a productive conversation. The first time you have it, you may walk away and say, oh man, I just got sent out of that person's office because I was too talkative. But responding to that at the later time when you guys have agreed to meet and discuss it is definitely a key point early on in your career. And that's how you really get to understand things and build a relationship with the people you're working with. Mm-hmm. Secondarily, and 2 and 3 kind of work together. Number 2, I always say, is to make those choices. Um, it can be hard, especially in the fraud fighting world. You can just look at the ACFE's fraud tree to see all the different kinds of fraud and types of specializations you can get into, and different jobs and positions within companies that have a fraud focus to them, and just say, I don't know what to pick. I'm interested in all of this. Not being able to really identify, a path you want to walk, or a choice that you're going to make can come back to hurt you. So I'm very much a trial and error type guy, and I think that if you look at the positions I've held over the past better part of a decade, you can see that I don't sit still if things aren't of interest to me or going in a direction that I think I'd be interested in, and I've taken a couple positions where I said, that was a great choice when I made it, and this is a great project to be on, and I'm glad that I'm here. But I know that this isn't going to be the end all for me. I'm not going to keep moving down the same path. So now it's time to pivot again. I have a friend of mine who, I sit down and talk with a bunch about our careers. He's a little bit junior to me in the forensic accounting world, and he had a conversation with me when he was thinking of changing positions and saying, oh, I'd really like to work in government. I'd really like to have a position at a government agency where I'm, playing the auditor role, or looking at, helping a government agency spend its money wisely. I listened, and we talked about that a little bit, and then the conversation turned again. He said, but it would be really good to, take part in a major investigation and be a part of something like that maybe a commercial firm or, a Fortune 500 company would do internally. I think that would be really great, and that'd be really interesting. And so, okay, we talked a little bit about that as well. And then he said, I really miss kind of that accounting background that I started with too. So it'd be great to get back into public accounting and to focus on, helping the public markets from an accounting perspective. And I stopped him and I said, you just walked through three different things that are completely different that you're very interested in. He said, yeah, they all do sound good. And I said, well, you gotta make that choice. You have to sit there and say, I understand that all of these things are interesting to me, but I'm going to do, the government job. I want to explore government jobs right now. And maybe in 3 or 4 years, you say that was the decision I made, and it's not something I want to do anymore. I'd like to go do something else. So making those choices, I think, is really important to a young, a young CFE or a young person interested in forensic accounting and fraud investigation, because you can sit on your hands for as long as possible and never get picked for that job, or take up that investigation because you're too nervous about picking the wrong thing. And then kind of my third piece of advice is always to be fearless, and that sits on the passion side too. You got to speak up when you're interested in something. You have to represent yourself honestly when you're excited, and honestly when you may not be as excited to work on a project as well, and not be afraid of appearing a certain way to people. It's always better to work with a staff or a manager who is honest with you and says, hey, this is who I am. This is a project I'm very interested in, so I'm going to go crazy on it, and I'm going to be talking about it 24/7, and I'm going to be focused on it 24/7. And if that doesn't work out, then we'll try to adjust it down the road, instead of trying to be the high school kid, right, who doesn't really care about anything, or it's not cool to care, I guess, is the best way that you can think about some of those attitudes. So feeling that passion and that enthusiasm, and not being afraid to represent it to other people, I think is the best way to align yourself with your career choices down the road.
What qualities do you have that you also see in other fraud fighters?
When you're dealing in the arena of fraud, you are almost always focused on the confirmation or the refusal or refuting a hypothesis or a set of circumstances. So a board of directors comes to you and says, we think our CFO is cooking the books to pump up his stock options. He's improving performance with journal entries at the end of the year that makes us think that he's booking these things just so the stock price goes up, and just so he can have a second, third, fourth home or yacht or whatever it is. Coming into that scenario from an outside perspective, we call it the devil's advocate mindset. You lay out all of the facts and circumstances in front of you, and you say, here's what I think the story is. How could I be wrong? Being able to ask that question intelligently, dispassionately, focused on the key cruxes of your case, is of the utmost importance when you're dealing with potential fraud or confirmed fraud that needs to be proved. You have to have a rock solid story, because there are dramatic legal implications and reputational implications to ever, confirming or suspecting someone of fraud. Obviously there are jail sentences as long as 150 years in some cases, as well as, if a CFO gets labeled or has rumors of embezzling or cooking the books in that manner, it's going to be very hard for them to get a job in financial services ever again. So being able to step back from, the fervor and the focus of your case and say, how could I be wrong? For me, that came into play. I was doing an investigation for a company who had gotten a tip-off from one of their third-party marketing vendors that the marketing manager in-house at the company that was working with this vendor had been abusing the expense account related to that marketing account. So we spent 6 weeks going over every expense, every invoice from the company, every interaction that this individual, this marketing account manager had with the vendor, and pieced together a story and dollar values and every kind of circumstance that happened along the way. And the final meeting, the attorneys met with the subject of the investigation, the individual, and said, here's what we believe happened. We received this tip from this vendor that you've been working with. Here's all the transactions that we think are, questionable. We'd really like to understand better, why this has happened and how it's happened, and maybe even pose to you being them talking to the subject of the investigation, how could we ever make this better? How can we get back to the place that we need to be, both with you and with the vendor? And explain to him again that the vendor had told us about this, and the individual turned back to the attorneys and said, well, all of those dollar values are exactly right. Everything that, all the facts and circumstances you have are absolutely correct except for one. And the attorney said, it sounds like we're on the right page, but what are you talking about? He said, the vendor has actually been telling me to charge all of this through their account. They've actually been telling me to, manipulate these things in certain ways, and that they would take care of it. So the attorneys were kind of walked down that path with him and tried to understand better. It turns out that this marketing vendor ended up losing a renewal of their contract with the company and decided to turn their scorn onto the individual and say that this marketing manager is the problem. He's been running us all up, and we're debating litigation or courtroom action based on not winning this contract. We feel we've been treated unfairly. So their story that they had spun that started this whole investigation and all of this work that we had done was completely fabricated in an attempt by this company to abuse their position and their marketing manager to put themselves in a better scenario. So the entire focus of our work had been flipped on its head. And that's where having that devil's advocate mindset, that how can I be wrong mindset, we were 100% on with the transactions in question, the numbers, the issues, but we didn't have the right understanding of the fact pattern. And so that's where you walk into that conversation with the subject of the investigation and you say, help me understand this. You don't walk in and say, we know it. Here it is on paper. We have this. This expense is incorrect. We can see here that it's been edited and changed. Therefore, we know that, that this is an issue and we're going to take you to jail now. There's much more of that kind of collaborative and understanding focus of that case. So being able to step back and identify the weak points or the less clear points in an investigation like that is definitely huge quality that you need to see. You can't drink from the Kool-Aid that you're making as you're doing these investigations, because oftentimes there's a lot of things that are outside your control or that you have no idea of, like it was in that case.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sitting with us and chatting today.
Oh, of course. It's been great.
This is Emily signing off. You can find all of our podcasts.
Well, I hope you were interested in that subject. Again, you're basically exploring at this stage, what type of an accountant, what area of accounting do you want to go into? You can certainly go into, well, what my opinion is, you can go into financial, which is from full bookkeeping, full accounting work to doing financial statements for a small, medium, or large business enterprise. You can go into tax accounting, which there's jobs in medium to large companies. I remember at 7-Up, we had an entire department of tax accountants because they had to, someone had to handle depreciation as it went into all the tax returns. Another person had to handle sales tax, use tax, state income tax. Someone had to be very aware of each state that they did business in order to make sure that we paid the proper amount, not overpaid taxes. And then, of course, the federal tax return group had their huge issues also because it's a culmination of all taxation rolled into one. So taxes is a huge taxation is a huge subject for accounting jobs. You can also, if you go into the IRS.gov website, look up enrolled agent, ENROLLED, agent, and you'll find information about an exam you can take that the IRS puts on, and that will allow you to prepare tax returns and to, in front of the IRS, take your client's cases in front of the IRS. You can do that through passing that exam. They grandfather CPAs into that, and they grandfather attorneys into that. Or you can just go directly in and just become an EA, enrolled agent. Also, you can, so that's taxation. You can also work for companies like H&R Block, and they will, there's a training session that they will have you go through. And there's a cat going crazy in the background. Hopefully you can't hear her. Oh, silly. Okay, I'm sorry for that. You can do your own tax business, given that you are able to pass that EA. What else? You can do your own bookkeeping business. You can go in and work for the IRS. IRS is always looking for people for examination, for helping the help desk, for processing. Also, the IRS, I think this gentleman who just did the podcast alluded to, if you're young enough, I don't know what the age cutoff is, it might be 35, I'm not sure, but if you like guns and law enforcement, you can get a job with the IRS or with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF, within the police department and Homeland Security. Those three areas, they have special needs for CPAs who actually, and accountants, who actually put on the flak jackets. They have their guns and weapons, and you go on raids after the big guys go in. You're right behind them, and you're basically going into houses where they're doing major raids of drug kingpins and bad people. And your job is to pick up everything computer oriented and every piece of paper, because that becomes your forensic project, because they're all trying to bring that person down. And we all know that Al Capone got brought down by an accountant. So those are jobs that are also available. I'm not a gun person, so I would be not a good one to go down that route. What else? Auditing, internal auditors, as well as working for a CPA firm doing audits. And you just heard from a forensic auditor, a forensic investigative accountant. And in the last few years, in the last year and a half, I've written 3 books that has accounting information in it. One book was a preparatory book to help people sit for the CPA exam. And it was the book for FAR, Financial Accounting and Reporting. So that was a 324-page book. I also co-authored early in 2014 a book that's on Amazon that is titled CFO Services, a Practical Guide for Accountants. And this year, coming out in July, is Act 3, your anti-retirement playbook. And what we consider Act 3 isn't what most people call retirement, because to us, retirement isn't only financial. It's your interests and your relationships and your dreams and your goals. You don't just be put on hold when you start collecting Social Security. But there is a section or two in there about accounting and financing and trying to get your act together as far as your personal life and your finances and your expenses. So there is accounting in that book. I never thought I would be at this stage having my name as an author or co-author on 3 different books. So you never know where your career is going to go. So that's kind of what I want to say. And let's just go back. I think we just have a couple more minutes of this hour. Let's go back to the textbook and just see if there's other cool areas. Impartiality, you have to be impartial. Basic elements to consider for inclusion in a report of investigation. Well, this is basic. You have to identify your client. And here's some basic wordings to it. In the case of a lawsuit, identify the parties. Identify the professional standards under which the work was conducted. Was it under the AICPA or under the ACFE? And identify exclusions on the report, exclusions in the reliance on your report. Like our report does not constitute either an audit performed in accordance with GAAP or attestation services, and we make no representation to the adequacy of our procedures for that purpose. There's some wordings here. It usually includes an executive summary, an opinion, and it talks about affidavits. This is I think this is going to be a very interesting course. There's a section on it's your deposition, and there's other considerations. Oh, avoid these mistakes in reporting. Do not overstate. Remember Sergeant Joe Friday on Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Well, the same thing holds true to your report of investigation. Use simple, straightforward language. Do not try to use those, let's say, highfalutin words. Say it basic, but say it correctly. Keep on task. Make sure that the relationship is reviewed. Privileged work product. This is interesting information. Here's a privileged work product. Check number, amount, check date, the vendor number, and the full name. This is part of the attorney work product, draft, tentative, and preliminary, privileged, and confidential. When you work for an attorney for an attorney's case, your work becomes covered under the privileged work product. There are situations where, let's say, the IRS contacts your client that they're going to be under a major investigation. You're not covered under privileged work product. You basically should have your own professional insurance to cover you in that situation, because then the IRS went to your client. Now the client's coming to you and saying, what's going on here? And basically the IRS just is going after your client for one reason or another. And you were, let's say, extremely professional and accurate in all your work with this client. What you say, how you say it, and who you say it to is not privileged. That means it's not covered under legal protection. You're hanging out there. So when you're hanging out there, you better have your own insurance to cover you. And they'll have people walking you through things too. But when you work for an attorney as their expert, then you're covered under the attorney's privileged work product. So with that, I think I'll just say we're at the end of the chapter almost. Be sure to read the entire book, the entire chapters in the 4 chapters left in this book. I think it's going to be very interesting, and I look forward to reading your papers. Take care. Bye-bye.